I'm going to first of all talk the election and about the blog and about the awesome hangout that we did, and then any stuff that you guys want to talk about, because I'm easy. That's me. So I usually do my taiko drums, but I actually realized I've got a clip from when Kat McDowell made up a theme for us live, and it was actually awesome. So I'm going to play that, and then we're going to get into it. So this is actually on, you know what, it's the 2.5 Oyajis intro. I need to get a Tokyo Tonight intro. I should get her on for that. Well, anyway, I'll play 2.5 Oyajis just because it's Kat McDowell and she's awesome. So here you go, intro. Boom.
Oh, it's Wednesday night. I'm just hanging out with my 2.5 Oyajis. My 2.5 Oyajis.
That is nice.
I hope you could hear it. I couldn't hear it, but I think it was awesome. I guess I'll do the real intro as well. But okay, welcome to Tokyo Tonight. We're now live. I've done my little intros and so on. Man, I just I had like the smoothest intro. I was right on the countdown. I had everything hooked up. I was all going well. I was talking with the crowd coming in, and I lose my camera. And I've had this happen just before I've started before, and I've had to reboot and I've lost 5 or 10 minutes, but to have it actually start after the broadcast started was a real pain. I'd also left the mic lying in front of the fan, which made it sound like I was in the middle of some sort of jet engine test. Apologies for that. These are the awkward starts and the awkward endings. Yes, it is the wrong day. That I just realized the Kat McDowell song. I need to get a Sunday version. I need to hit her up for a proper theme song for this. Actually, I should get a theme song. Well, this is a regular thing now. Good to see you all. I am going to talk random stuff as I do. A big shout out at the moment, as I've already just given to Edo Inoue, who is of course a former Caucasian citizen of America, who has renounced his American citizenship and become a citizen of Japan, recently pre-voted in the Tokyo election. I'm a little bit careful about talking politics, but what the hell, it's Tokyo election, so I'll give you my take on it. Also very interesting that I just noticed tonight, I was watching the NHK News at 7, which I record every night, so I like watch that when my lad gets to bed at about 8:30. I come out and sometimes, you know, the 9 o'clock news is starting, and my wife is saying, why don't you just watch the 9 o'clock news? And I'm insistent, no, it has to be the 7 o'clock news. It's like the 7-minute abs. It's the 7 o'clock news. No other time will, you know, it's the presenter, Take Pon, as he's called by adoring housewives all over Japan. I don't even know what his real name is, actually. I just call him Take Pon, but I just tell him, I don't believe any news if it's not told by Take Pon. So Takepon was covering the 7 o'clock, the Tokyo elections today. Of course, 1 week to go, and all the candidates are out there standing on buses and making lots of noise and being annoying and all that sort of stuff. But yes, Edo Inoue corrects me. He is still Caucasian. So you haven't completed the process yet, obviously. And I was kind of shocked. Well, not shocked. I don't know what I'd say. I was surprised. You know, our favorite. Maybe you recall from years ago, she was actually quite active in the J vlogging community when it was kind of a big thing, and she was one of the winners of Next Up, was Random Yoko, and she's gone on to a very interesting career. I think when she started out, she had lived overseas, and I think she had a foreign boyfriend, and she was kind of into the international scene on YouTube, and I think she kind of went through some stuff, and basically somewhere along the line became kind of politically active, and very politically active on her YouTube channel and on Twitter. Big fan of the right-wing channels on YouTube, Sakura channel, and a lot of speakers on Nico Doga, and she became very active in that, and she's basically become very politically activist, which actually is cool with me. Honestly, I mean, I'm not just saying this, some of my best friends are extreme right-wingers. And you know, as well as I've been in homestays of communists, you know, it's all good actually. And I find Japanese people who are usually very shy about talking politics, you know, I actually enjoy people. If you have an opinion, you can have an interesting discussion, and I like people who do that. So I actually find it kind of interesting. Although I do admit I've had interactions with her on Twitter, which have left me so befuddled that I have blocked her a couple of times. She is unblocked at the moment, but I think I unfollowed her because she was posting too much stuff. But nonetheless, I find her an interesting person, and she's one of the YouTube community. And so I'm watching the news tonight, and boom, there she is, right beside former, what do they call him, Air Vice Marshal, or he's basically like one of the senior dudes in the Air Self-Defense Forces, Tamogami, who is the candidate for the Tokyo governor election, backed by Shintaro Ishihara, former governor. So I guess we'll start with him. He is basically, I suppose, if you talk on a political spectrum, and let's start on the. I mean, there are basically 4 considered real contenders that go in the news. There's a few other interesting candidates, but in terms of, well, so why is this happening? Let's go through the story of this. Why is this happening? Aino points out, she translates a lot of right-wing stuff into English, and the translation's good, and honestly, that's all good, actually. And one thing that really frustrates me about, the simplistic way that Japan gets broadcast outside of Japan is this idea, and admittedly, well, that politics is very unitarian, that everybody just supports the LDP. The LDP only has one view on everything, and that Japan is becoming right-wing, and there's a lot of loss of nuance. That there's a lot of very, very diverse political ideas, and people in America criticizing the Japanese political system, they only have 2 parties that ideologically are practically undistinguishable to most people outside of America. I mean, on things like foreign policy and defense and the things that affect other countries, there really isn't much difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, although I know a lot of Americans will take exception to that, but really there isn't a lot of dramatic ideology difference. You look at Japan, there's how many was the last count? I'm sure Edo knows, there's 12 parties in parliament. One of the biggest opposition parties, in fact, recently one of the second highest polling party was the Communist Party of Japan, which at various times is actually, under MacArthur, it came close to actually becoming the elected government of Japan. And you've got everything from far right to far left. Even within parties, there are factions that go on like this. Japanese are really, really politically, I think, ideologically sophisticated, although they're not very open about it. It's not an easy subject to have a conversation about. But Japanese politics is really, really diverse, and that's what makes it so interesting. So it's great if she's translating the right-wing stuff and her ideas and ideology, which a lot of people follow. I think it's good because that helps, I think, outsiders understand the nuance of the ideas and to correctly understand the discussion. The discussion of Japanese politics, all too often, 1, it gets oversimplified, and 2, it gets dictated by people outside of Japan with agendas. The head of NHK did not say that having sex slaves is totally normal and everybody did it. He never said that. Not that I'm defending him, of course, but the point is, he was talking about the idea of comfort women, which are basically, in the sense of that word being a term for military brothels, military prostitutes. And that's a sensitive subject. And the question, the fact that he missed the entire point, that the whole basis of claims against Japan by victims in Korea and other countries is that they were coerced, he kind of skipped over that part of it. But that's obviously the way that it is taken to many of the victim countries. And that's why it was a big problem. But that he wasn't actually saying, nobody says sex slaves are okay. I mean, it makes people look completely insane here when they talk about that. But so it's nice to see people on the right wing of the spectrum at least explain what they're saying. I mean, even, agree with it or disagree with it, but at least understand what the discussion is about correctly first, and don't just be stupid with it, which is what happens so often. So awesome. But anyway, which was another one of the big topics this week. So very Ahmed is off again on the 2-party system, and yes, financial. But exactly. I mean, I'm sorry, if you're a huge lobbying interest in America, I don't know, for the doctors, do you only make donations to one of the parties? I mean, the whole fact that the US political system is now a dual system, I mean, it just makes it easy for the lobbyists to pay off both sides, and which is why, I mean, I think anyone with a brain can see that really, really dramatic politics and ideology seems to be gone now, at least in terms of the legislative process, which has been corrupted by money politics in the States, as it has in other places, and it's because a 2-party system is a flawed system of democracy, if you ask me. But anyway, so in Tokyo we have 20 candidates, but the main 4, starting with Tamogami, he's a really interesting guy. I should have read up on him a little bit before this, but he was basically in the SDF and was forced to resign. He was he had a pay cut of 2 months' pay and everything because he published an essay, I think, in a journal, basically advocating a framework for a modern for basically changing, based on the constitution changing, allowing reform of the self-defense forces into a normal military force, and kind of the placing of of Japan's military as a normal military and what it could sort of do. By the way, I'm just going to put a title on this. Boom, boom. Tokyo election roundup. And so that of course, I mean, the people who are against the pacifists in Japan and the far left in Japan, which are still a very big and powerful voice, especially through the Asahi Shimbun newspaper, were of course outraged by this, and he was eventually forced to resign. But of course he became the darling of the right wing as someone who's, you know, got a reasonable sense of humor, and he's quite eloquent, and he frankly kind of said some stuff which even to me sounds a lot like common sense. I came from a military family, and you know, the idea that Japan can have a normal defense force I don't think should be controversial, and it should be something that's discussed, although people said if that is something that's discussed, shouldn't be the self-defense forces, they shouldn't be thinking that they're a military. I think that's a little bit unrealistic. I think it's perfectly normal to expect that people in the self-defense forces do have brains and do think about what they do. So he was seen on the right wing as having had a bit of a harsh run, and on the left wing as being, you know, a dangerous force of remilitarization. So he left the self-defense forces. Apparently he made some sort of crack to a newspaper. They asked how's his family taking his punishment. He's saying, they're taking it well. Just last week they started giving me hot food again. Which is like, I appreciate that he has that sort of a sense of humor, which is another thing I find actually. People on the right wing tend to have senses of humor, people on the left really don't, and that seems to be a universal thing, even though I consider myself socially liberal. But yes, he did not do very well out of that. He has come out since. I think I saw some people when I was talking a little bit about him earlier. Some people found some old quotes and something about, for example, you know, when there were rapes of women at 4 o'clock in the morning by SDF, and he said, well, what were those women doing out at 4 o'clock in the morning anyway? Why isn't anyone asking that? Which, yes, I mean, just like our good US military friends in Okinawa kind of do as well over the rape incidents down there. I mean, I remember the worst rape incident, which is what practically caused this whole relocation of Futenma base. It was a rape of a child back in, 1992 or 95 or something around that time. It was kind of the final straw for the people who were already against the base. But it really kind of changed the whole landscape of the bases in Okinawa, was this particular abduction and rape by these Marines. And I think one of the top US military brass in Okinawa said, you know, what really offends me is that the guys were just so stupid when they could have just gone and got a prostitute instead. Which, again, probably, well, again, I come from a military family background, so I appreciate the agricultural simplicity of of the thought, but you know, you have to remember these people abducted and raped a child, and that's why a huge military base is being forced into the ocean, you know, and the people with the ocean are complaining about it. You know, just as I like to say, just don't go there. Just don't go there. I found the clip the other day, by the way. There's a scene in Anger Management with the guy, what's his name, Guzman. He plays a small part in a lot of movies. He's got a great scene about recounting a story of telling someone not to go there and blacking out, and then standing above him screaming at the guy, I told you not to go there. I get that a lot. Anyway, actually, I don't black out and beat people up and say don't go there, but yes, I think of that when I say don't go there. By the way, Michael Pickett, I am keeping one eye on comments, and I will get back onto comments in a sec. I'm going to do a quick roundup of the remaining candidates. Michael Pickett does mention Hashimoto, who, yes, apparently was feeling like Tokyo was once again getting the better of Osaka, and has called a snap city election, mayoral election in Osaka, which we will get to. But yes. Anyway, and you know what? There's some interesting discussion going on in the comments that I will come back to. But anyway, so the other candidates. Tamogami, interesting guy. What I don't like about him is the same thing I don't like about a lot of the candidates, which is that they're not from Tokyo, or even if they are from, I don't know if they're from Tokyo or not, some of them, but frankly, they just come from this kind of, they're all bureaucrats from a thick sort of bureaucratic background, and they're just running on that on this kind of one policy platform, this idea that Tokyo is like the heart of Japan and that they can change Japan from Tokyo doing this thing. And they're all just one-dimensional candidates. This guy's saying, well, look at my defense expertise and experience, and I'm going to, try to influence Japanese defense policy and history teaching and whatnot from Tokyo. And then you got Masazoi, who's the LDP-backed candidate. He used to be a Minister of Health under LDP government. And he's talked about how I will use my Ministry of Health expertise to make Tokyo a leading light of healthcare throughout Japan, which sounds wonderful, but, I wonder about everything else. And then you've got Hosokawa, former PM, who I will come to in some more detail as well. He's coming back like, I'm going to change, the energy policy of Japan, which I guess you can actually do through demanding, the Tokyo government controls a lot of the shares of TEPCO, and he says that he'll use control of those shares to stop them restarting nuclear power plants. And TEPCO is the largest power company in Japan, and of course owns the nuclear power plants that include those ones that were in Fukushima. So he's saying he'll basically help force Japan to be nuclear free against the policy of the national government, the LDP, if they make him. And he's backed by Junichiro Koizumi, probably the most popular Japanese prime minister ever, certainly in the time that I've been in Japan. And Hosokawa's an interesting character, and I'll come back to him. But the thing is that all these guys, including Hosokawa, they're not Tokyo people. They're just like using the Tokyo election as a platform for their ideas. And come back. So why is this happening? This is happening because Inose, the former governor, who was exactly after being 1 year in office, well, and truth is, it wasn't 1 year. He was in power for more, for the whole time that Ishihara was governor of Tokyo, which was like for, I don't know how many years, it was like 8 years. And he was basically, Ishihara was the gaffe-prone kind of popular political face who won the elections, and Inose was the technocrat, was the book writing, technocrat who actually had this kind of vision for how to run Tokyo better than the socialist governors had governed Tokyo. And basically Ishihara got all the credit for all the work that Inose did actually running Tokyo very well. And the thing is that everybody knew by the time that Ishihara was quitting that Inose was really the guy who actually did all the work which made Ishihara so popular as governor. People didn't vote for Ishihara as governor because they want to slaughter Chinese when there's an earthquake or start a war or do all this other sort of stuff that Ishihara was going off about. They just liked him because, unlike most of the governors of Tokyo, he actually ran Tokyo reasonably well. He showed results. But everyone knew that it was Inose that was the credit with this, who was a non-politician, which was another reason to like him. So of course he won the Tokyo election when Ishihara resigned by the biggest landslide ever at a local election, with the most votes, remembering that Tokyo is one of the biggest local election constituencies in the world. I mean, it's as big as a big country, much bigger than New Zealand. Was this like 10 million voters? I think Edo knows the stats on this. But he won it by this huge landslide because everyone knew, and I told, my wife said, who should she vote for? I said, vote for Inose. And it was just because he was he'd proven he was the best. He was good at running Tokyo well. And he got elected, and some attribute it to his being a bit of a political novice, that apparently, a lobbyist, a medical lobby group, affiliated with a dirty as hell corrupt politician from Kagoshima, from the bottom of Kyushu, has a political group that apparently pays and receives money all over the place, just real old-fashioned money politics. And apparently there's another thing as well, another backstory with Inose, apart from the fact he's actually a very competent guy. He actually ran the whole Tokyo Olympic bid and became governor with his wife suddenly dying, I think, of cancer. So, he really did this right through a very harsh personal crisis and really did a good job with it. And apparently, there's some confusion with the explanation, whether this was personal, whether it was to help with the affairs of his wife passing away, all these things. But apparently, one of these lobby groups put $500,000 in a suitcase in his hands and said, just hold on to this. And Eno said, whether he knew what he was doing or not, took the suitcase and he put all the money into a safe, and he says that he never touched it, which more or less is true. It sounds like the money was moved from one safe to another safe. And when he was being interrogated about this, he was, you lied, you did touch the money. But he never actually used a single yen of the money that was taken. And when this kind of came out, after about a year, he gave all the money back, and having never actually used it and saying I was naive and I didn't know what was going on with it. Probably there was a medical lobby group that was trying to influence. There was going to be a big hospital, public hospital, which was on sale to be privatized in Tokyo, and it looks like they were trying to buy influence for that, frankly. But before this even got to that point, he just got the money, and his explanations were not good enough. He was a bit naive. He gave all the money back, but basically he had to step down. I don't feel like he had to step down. I don't know. I mean, there's much worse that goes on in Japanese politics. There's no proof that he actually did anything based on getting the money. If they'd waited another 6 months, it might have been more interesting with the sale of this hospital coming up. But, he's just more guilty, as he said himself, of being naive and stupid than actually being corrupt, although he might have ended up corrupt, if he'd been given more time. What's interesting is that he announced his resignation on the basis of having accepted a $500,000 bribe that he returned without using. And yet, one of the headline candidates for the Tokyo election to replace him, Hosokawa, who's a former PM of Japan from back in the 90s, actually from the first time the LDP ever got thrown out, he was, I believe, the first prime minister to replace the first non-LDP prime minister in Japan's post-war history. And he was thrown out because the Sago Courier Company, it's one of the well-known 3 or 4 big post courier companies in Japan, paid him $1 million bribe that he took and used. So if he'd also had to resign, I don't kind of see how Hosokawa gets to run. I mean, granted, it was like 15 years ago, but what? And is this deflation that now Now they only get bribes half the value of 15 years ago? It was the bubble, I guess. Probably the lady who gave him the $1 million bribe was probably in a bodycon outfit, miniskirt and so on. But yeah. Oh, that's right. The money doesn't fit in the bag was, thank you, KHK NYS. They're interrogating him in Parliament, basically just bashing him because they can. And he's a dumbass who put himself in that situation. But the whole thing, they're interrogating, so what happened? And say, I put the money in a bag and I took it out. And they said, show me the bag, and here's the bag, and put the money in the bag. It won't fit. And he said it would, and he tried to put the money in the bag, and it didn't work. He couldn't get it to fit. And it was just like, the prosecutors getting O.J. Simpson to put on the glove that had shrunk because of the blood. So it wouldn't fit anymore. And it just looked so lame, and it was horrible. But here's the thing. There's a lot of corrupt, dirty guys in Japanese politics, and he also was well liked because he wasn't a politician and because he wasn't one of those guys. And it's kind of ironic, I guess. How Ishihara survived all these years in politics with all these connections and never getting into any kind of scandal like that. And it's obvious that this guy only just got caught because he wasn't politically savvy enough. And the thing was, he was competent. He was all that I want from a governor of Tokyo. As a resident of Tokyo, I just want a guy who's just going to do the job right and not use it as a personal platform for some crap, that has nothing to do with Tokyo. I mean, as a Tokyo resident, of course, and this is the same of big cities all around the world, our local, we pay disproportionate tax. Our taxes go out to help all the building roads to nowhere in the middle, all over Japan, and social welfare and making sure that Tokyo doesn't get too rich and the rest of Japan gets poor. We kind of carry the rest of the country a bit here. The rest and the rest of the country hates Tokyo back for it. But so at the end of the day, as a Tokyo resident, and I'm not allowed to vote, and we'll get to that. But as someone not allowed to vote, even though I'm on my way to becoming a permanent resident in Tokyo, all I want is someone who will just stand up and do a good job and just be a good Tokyo governor. And I don't know, I don't see a candidate who's there. There's Masazoi, who it looks like a fun job because he used to be Minister of Health, but he's got no ideas for Tokyo other than building hospitals. It's like these bureaucrats, the self-defense force bureaucrat who's going to talk about using Tokyo for defense. I have no idea how you can do that. Masazoi, who's probably going to win. He's backed by the government, and the government seems to be doing well enough. No one really seems to like him, and it was actually funny because one of the far right-wing members of the LDP, his ex-wife, was published in the left-wing tabloids, and perhaps this was actually made up, and maybe this was actually kind of opportunistic, as saying that she would refuse to endorse him because he was a non-alimony-paying deadbeat scumbag, which she retracted the next day. In spite of that, he's surviving though because generally the media, which I think and here we go, the media has really been bashing Hosokawa, which is interesting because with him and Koizumi, you'd think that'd be a pretty tough combination to beat. and granted, it's with these things, you never know how much of it is actually the media being driven with an agenda. Whether this is nuclear power, man, whether this is the government and the Keisha clubs, the press clubs, all just deciding to gang up on Hosokawa, or whether he's really doing this to himself. Like he said, there's some story being published the other day about how he was talking about how he wants to do a state visit to China when he becomes governor of Tokyo to repair the damage that's happening with Japan. But he's governor of Tokyo. Why are you doing a state visit to China? Why are you even talking about that? That's not relevant. I'm worried about my sewage and my power. And the roads. I don't care if I don't want you to spend my taxes going to China on a state visit. And he's talking another day about apparently Russia's been hiding reports of dead polar bears in the Arctic, which is interesting. From Fukushima radiation, which is interesting because there are not even sick people in Japan, in spite of all the propaganda that's on the web that says it's being hidden. So this kind of stuff which makes him look like conspiracy brother, or like he's right. He's like he is a bit old and he's in an Alzheimer's episode, is thinking that he's running for Prime Minister of Japan again, and it's very confusing. And he looks a bit bad, and as a result, his campaign isn't getting momentum, which it might do with the anti-nuclear lot. Might be getting more momentum, perhaps, if also the anti-nuclear vote wasn't split by a very credible communist candidate who's like the head of the Lawyers Association. One of the lawyer associations in Tokyo, and has a very credible background as a good solid communist candidate and an anti-nuclear candidate. So there's no unified anti-nuclear candidate, and unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, the communists never actually get much of a threshold of a vote, but they'll get they'll get like 10% of the votes, which is kind of a critical gap which is taken away from someone else who might come in and possibly push those policies. But at the same time, they're not going to vote for Hosokawa, and Hosokawa's people probably not. It will be people who won't want to vote for communists. So I don't know. Masa's always the only guy who's going to get in. Of course, there's Dr. Nakamatsu, the famous inventor, who I think is spending all of his patent and invention money on running for governor every time. And I always like to say this is his time, and hopefully this will be your year, Dr. Nakamatsu. I don't know what you'd do. There's also, of course, Smile, Mac Akasaka, who so I think Edo mentioned is actually one of the. He's actually backed by one of the religious parties, and he has like these insane. Look at my HikoZine. You can see the videos. There's a campaign video of him just acting crazy and happy, which is, I guess, not bad, and it's better than some of the alternatives voting. What was very interesting was seeing Random Yoko backing Tamogami on a bus today. That was kind of cool, except there's one thing, and actually I was talking with some people on Twitter about this. Some of the people that support him, they support him because he's against voting rights for foreign permanent residents, which I'm guessing Edo probably is against as well, because he went to all the trouble of becoming a citizen and renouncing his American citizenship. So for someone like me becoming a permanent resident and getting to keep all my other privileges and getting to vote like him wouldn't really be fair. Bit of background on that. There's a bill going through the parliament, and it has been stalled since the Democrats were in power. But there's a draft bill floating around somewhere that would allow foreign permanent residents to vote in local elections, not national elections in Japan. The philosophy behind this being that, well, a lot of countries allow this. They won't. Sometimes they even allow permanent residents to vote in national elections. But certainly where they don't, there is a trend towards trying to include permanent foreign residents, people who are in the communities and are paying taxes, and to involve them in the political process so that they are not ostracized or feeling ostracized or outside of society. And there is a bill that's been put before Parliament that has some support that would allow permanent residents to vote. This is kind of seen as by the people, particularly on the far right, as a fifth column. It's a way to let North Koreans. There are very pronounced aggregations of permanent resident North Korean, South Korean, and Chinese neighborhoods in different parts of Japan, particularly in West Japan, but in parts of Tokyo as well. And some of them said, well, if you allow this, you could have actual neighborhoods or small towns or wards in Tokyo that could actually politically come under the control of people who could be perceived as being influenced by the Communist Party of China or North Korea. And because of that, the right-wing guys are all very much against that. And Tamogami is one of the guys who says that. Random Yoko's put some tweets that I've disagreed with, or I've had some disagreements with about, with regards to race mixing. It was a little bit far. That was too much for me. And I think the first time I blocked her was when she started talking about racial stuff. but also about the stopping interference of outsiders in Japanese politics by allowing foreign permanent residents, who I don't think are outsiders per se, but fine. I mean, if I want to vote, I'll get citizenship. But she expressed this view that outsiders shouldn't be allowed to vote and, shouldn't be allowed to interfere in domestic politics. They've got their politics, we have ours. And, I completely agree with that, which is why I found it kind of ironic and confusing that Rana Miyoko, who I understand still lives in Kyushu, is campaigning in a Tokyo election. I'm against outside interference in local politics as well. But, that's just me. Anyway, I'm a Tokyo guy. All these Kyushu people coming trying to tell us Tokyo people what to do. End of the world. I think that's all I'm going to say on that election. And that's taken quite a lot of time now, actually. I'm going to go back and quickly zoom back over the comments. I'm sorry, they're completely off to the side now. Logistics, it falls apart. So yes, I see that Kanada Jean and Edo Inoue. Yeah, by the way, Edo Inoue, if you haven't seen Kanada Jean, actually, and I talked about this when she was on our show, she did a short video featuring white Japanese people, and some born like half or actually born as citizens of Japan, some born and raised in Japan and became Japanese citizens, sports athletes and whatever. There is a very small but a growing category of actual Japanese naturalized, sometimes born naturalized Caucasian Japanese, and she did a little video about it, and I was kind of thinking, what's this going to be about? And it was actually really good, and I recommend it. So, okay, I am seeing everybody freaking out now about when I had my wardrobe malfunction. I think I got censored by NBC or whichever network it was. By the way, what is with the Super Bowl? Honestly, I'm seeing a lot of chatter about Super Bowl on the web. From all I can, it seems to be a contest between advertising companies making commercials and a concert. I thought it had something to do with sports, but I cannot see any connection with sports whatsoever. I don't know what it's got anything to do with on that. But there you go. There are a lot of comments, which is a good thing. Some people talking about the energy thing. And Ahmed actually talking about the best form of energy right now is gas plants. And actually, this is what I agree with. I know, Ado, you disagree with this and some other people do, but exactly, nuclear would be great if it weren't for the earthquake risk, and that's exactly where I come from on this. I'm not against nuclear power per se, provided it's done right, but the fact that Japan is the most earthquake-prone country in the world, and everyone's been waiting to see what happens when you have a huge earthquake affect a nuclear power plant directly, and we found out, and it's not a good combination. And we have, and some nuclear power plants have been found to be on top of active faults, and this is not what the case of Fukushima was. That was just a tsunami. That was one thing, but we actually have power plants, like particularly the one in Hamaoka, in Shizuoka, that's directly on top of what's considered the most dangerous fault line in Japan right now, where everyone's been waiting for the big one, and at the same time beside the area considered the worst tsunami risk in Japan. And Khan, who I disagreed with most things that he did, but I thought he was right to order that plant be completely shut down and decommissioned, and it was shut down, and instead they built a higher seawall, like 18 meters, 6 stories high. And they said, okay, now can we turn it back on? But it's not just the tsunami thing, it's the fact that it's directly on top of a huge fault line, and we still don't know if that's dangerous or not. And that's just it. They have these fast breeder reactors and these pebble core things which are meant to be mega safe and all that, and if all that's true and that can really work, and you can put these things up in the mountains and quakes won't affect them, that's great, and do that. But, I mean, I don't want to be here for another... for all the drama and exaggeration and propaganda that goes on around Fukushima, there is one undeniable fact, which is that it was a quadruple meltdown, and there are hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their livelihoods from having to be relocated. I mean, it's basically destroyed the lives of a lot of these people, and the economy of Fukushima, and the reputation of Fukushima and Japan. And I don't know, my view on it is I'm not anti-nuclear, but do it right if you're going to do it, and I'm sorry, I will pay the extra energy prices, as we've all been paying, because all the nuclear power plants have been shut down anyway for the last 2 years. We're all paying it. And I'll keep paying them, to stay without nuclear power unless I can be completely convinced that it's right. And this is what the government's done too. The government's tightened up all the safety criteria, and no nuclear power plant in Japan yet meets that safety criteria, and that's why none of them have been turned back on. So I think you're right, gas. I mean, there's gas in there. At least they're finding now some gas within Japanese territorial waters, and there might be a chance for Japan to be able to protect itself against external economic shocks and war and so on. Because, we have to import everything apart from that at the moment. But, whatever it is, honestly, even if they have to burn dirty coal, I don't care. I'm not against the idea of nuclear power ever coming back, or I'm not anti-nuclear like most of my New Zealand friends are, but do it right, and it's not being done right, and that's my concern. So yeah, I'm with you, Ahmed, actually on that. And there we go. 11 million roughly voters in Tokyo. Ada just confirmed that. That's a lot of voters. It's like 2.5 times New Zealand. And yeah, I'm catching up now, but obviously I completely agree. The non-politicians exactly who get caught out in the scandals, where the smarter politicians do the same things and just get away with it better, which is kind of a bit sad, but we will see, And actually, so Edo brings up a good point about Tamogami, that, and it is probably his biggest selling point, if anything, that, everyone's waiting for the big one to hit Tokyo directly, and if that happens, a marshal, vice marshal of the self-defense forces is a good person to have in charge in an emergency like that. And I agree with that. I come from a military family myself, and that's what military people do. They do logistics, emergency logistics. I'd be perfectly comfortable with someone like him being in charge in the case of an emergency, like a major earthquake. But there again, that's not just what running Tokyo involves. So I'm not passionately against the guy, but he's not going to win. Masazo is probably going to win it. Tamogami and Hosokawa will compete for second, third, and the communist guy will come fourth. Of course, Nakamatsu could take the whole thing out, and I'd like to see that, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to come back. Second topic I'm going to talk about, and I've talked a long time on that, and I'm sorry for that, but and I am watching comments now. Just come back to the Taiji blogs that I did. And actually, one of these was last week, and I did a follow-up blog to it. I'm very interested in the support that's come back from it. I think if I can commentate on the reaction, I'm very happy to see that there's been a real, well, I can't really tell the impact of it, but I've been getting a lot of RTs from a lot of environmental movement-oriented people. And I think what those people appreciate, the people who are really driving it, who I appreciate, there are some people who are very pro-environmental, but they have like Japanese family ties or whatever, and they're looking for some sort of middle road, which seems lost in much of the debate. And there's a lady who actually said her husband would offer to translate it, which I said, great, I'll post it up on the blog with it or beside it as an extra one, so it's all there to be seen in both languages. It's wonderful. The aim of the blog, as you could see, was not to take a position per se on whether it's right or wrong. The truth is, I'm really happy. I'm not that passionate either way on the actual issue, but just to set up a basis that there can actually just be a discussion and try to get some of the rancor out, which might be impossible because there is a problem. On the Japanese side, these are white supremacists trying to, desecrate Japanese culture and tradition, and on the other side, you've got, people who see this murdering kids. There are people who see dolphins as the equivalent of murdering human beings, and it's really very hard to get those people to tell them to just focus on the safety issue or just focus on the humaneness. What is a very interesting story this week that's also in my HikoZine. By the way, link straight below the video and go and check it out because all the stuff that I want to talk about is all on there. Family Mart was going to actually start a bento, a foie gras based bento. Foie gras it's not bad. I played rugby for a French team. I was given foie gras as a present a few times. I tried it, but frankly, I quite like pate. Not such a big fan of foie gras actually. It's too fatty for me. I mean, I've tried it like when it's cooked, and that's actually very nice. And this was actually a cooked foie gras bento. Foie gras, you'll know that the way that it's raised is they have these ducks that are basically obesely force-fed in order to cause their livers to become overly fat or something like that, and then they're killed for the livers, and that liver is the foie gras, and tastes okay. It's pretty good actually, and of course it's considered a delicacy. But the technique used to get the foie gras is, I mean, I think to any normal person, discomforting. It's definitely, you know, borderline cruelty. And it was interesting. It was on the basis of the cruelty of the process of raising the foie gras that there were some groups in Japan, civil groups, that complained to Family Mart that, look, this is cruel. You know, you are sponsoring cruelty to animals by having a foie gras bento. Family Mart bought it, and they decided not to run with the foie gras bento. So here are all these people talking about how Japan is this cruel, brutal, World War II, unforgiving, you know, animal, you know, seal beating, whatever, on dolphins or whatever, and that, you know, somehow this is an issue with Japanese cruelty or something. But you've got a case right here with foie gras, you know, where a company was quite easily persuaded that it's not a good thing to run with, like for business, that this is cruel. And so I'm just showing that, you know, cruelty-based, you know, these kind of, it's not culture. And this is something which can be objectively, you can reduce a measure of cruelty down to an objective discussion, and as I think you can do with the dolphins. And certainly here's my view. And this was mentioned in the Cove. There was an interesting part of the Cove which was talking about the debate where it actually had the fishermen and a person from the Ministry of Fisheries. They talked about the techniques for a bit, and they said that the techniques that they use, they believe, are humane. They're sufficiently humane that it doesn't constitute cruelty. It doesn't look good. I mean, frankly, you know, killing large animals never does look good. But they think it's sufficiently humane, and there's some debate about that. And Koizumi said the other day, responding obviously to the U.S. ambassador's comments, that, you know, the fishermen are looking at actually trying to improve that technique to make it even more humane. But I think there's a debate that can be had there without all of the, you know, nationalism, without all of the baby murdering, and you know, and you can have a cold hard look at that. And frankly, and there's a proof, if you're in the environmental movement and you think that, you know, Japanese are cruel people that can't be persuaded on arguments based on cruelty or whatever, or that's not working, it's worked. I mean, this is proof of that. So, you know, don't focus on demonizing Japan and Japanese people, and don't get hysterical about putting this in a position that most people, even in your own countries, don't accept, that, which is that eating animals is the same as murdering people, which a lot of people ethically and reasonably think for various reasons. But, you know, that's not yet mainstream global culture. But there's plenty of common ground where you can have a discussion which can influence positive change for both sides. You know, you could keep the dolphin hunt but do it more humanely, or you could convince all sides that it's not sufficiently humane, and whatever. But you know, whatever the outcome you get is good, but just so long as it's not this rancor and racism and horrible stuff that you see. So I'm very interested to see, probably, and it's understandable that the conservation side would get more into an offering of ideas for how to get more progress on the issue, because frankly, while they're raising lots of money and garnering lots of outrage and getting lots of support and so on, and the issue is getting a high profile, it's not getting any results. Japan is just saying, say to the hand, you white supremacists, you know, you cultural colonial people, and you know, they're hitting up against a wall, and it's because they're doing it wrong, and that's what I'm telling them. They're doing it wrong, and just as I'm saying to the Japanese government, responding arrogantly like they're above it is also, in the end of the day, it's harming Japan's credibility where it needs it on other issues. You know, they need it with dealing with China, they need it with economy issues and so on, and you know, you don't want to have the other people thinking that you're a baby seal basher. So, you know, I'd really like to see the discussion be more focused, and I'm very happy to see that some people were very interested to see the ideas, you know, even if it meant moving away from very strongly held views and putting those aside in order to take another line that they, you know, isn't the center of what they feel but might get a better result. And frankly, as long as it's a better result for everybody, I mean, that's what you want. At the end of the day, you don't want to bash the other side down. That's not going to work, not with this issue. So yes, I really do appreciate the positive feedback on that, and that was very interesting this week. 2.5 Oyajis on Wednesday with Kurt. One of the best, if not the best, 2.5 Oyajis ever. And it was actually, Kurt's a really good storyteller, and I knew this. And to be honest, I've seen a reasonable number of his videos, although certainly, I mean, he's made hundreds of them. But I know he's an interesting guy, and he makes really interesting videos. And I know he's drawn in a lot of people that I also like and respect. But, you know, and I've seen some videos of him talking about religion and philosophy, you know, his bushwalking videos, and he seems like this kind of quiet, contemplative, you know, Discovery Channel type guy. And he caught me off guard so many times on our. He's such a good storyteller, and he told such great stories. The first story caught me so off guard. The story that one day when he was kind of a hippie Southern Californian, and he just got the idea. He was studying racial studies at university, and he got the idea of trying to use makeup and wigs and clothes to try to make himself look black and drive into Compton in South Central Los Angeles and walk around and see what will happen. That is a hell of a story. And yeah, he's got a Yakuza story. He's got the sides of him I had no idea, and they were all really well told, really interesting. And Kurt is always Kurt. He's always this, well, yeah, I went along, gosh, it was really tough. I mean, he went through the whole thing without using profanity, or which apparently is something he's taught himself to do. It was a really fun, remarkable thing. It was a great discussion with the four of us, but it was mainly Kurt telling his stories. And if you ask me, the best videos on YouTube and the best 2.5 Oyajis are an interesting guest telling great stories, and that's what this was. So much love to Kurt Bell, to Softy Papa. That was a really, really great episode, and if you haven't seen it, do go and check it out, because it is an hour, but I can really recommend. This is an hour that's worth it. It's another reason I wish I could go back and make this a podcast in some way, and I wish that YouTube would maybe buy SoundCloud or do something like that, so that there could be like an audio version of YouTube, which for lots of very good reasons there isn't, but I wish that they could. But whatever, go and check it out, because it was really awesome. I just got a tweet actually from my friend Alex Lull. It's not Alex Lulz, it's Alex LUZ, who points out apparently cruelty-free foie gras is possible. It's just expensive to buy. Well, if that's the case, make it more expensive. I mean, I don't care. So, oh no, and actually I got a response from Random Yoko on Twitter. Well, this is interesting. With Devi. Yeah, I did make mention about Devi. Devi Sukarno is an interesting character. She's married to the former dictator president of Indonesia. She's actually a very interesting person, and she actually sometimes I shudder to say this, I even agree with some of her political views sometimes when she expresses them, and she's kind of right wing. But I saw them both on top of a bus, and she said that Yoko said races shouldn't mix, and Devi is married to a dictator of Indonesia. And she got in the news lately for slapping a mother. Apparently, and the mother filed criminal charges. And she was put up to it by a TV show. So I found it kind of funny to see the two of them on a bus supporting Tamogami, even though I'm perfectly cool with that. So I am actually now very, very curious as to what she was tweeting at me, because it sounds like she might be a little bit upset. I'm sorry, no offense intended. Actually, I think it's totally cool. Although, and I can't see it. Someone saw your tweet about campaign for Tomago. Did never imagine Random Milko is that popular. Oh, okay. So this is Chris saying that, not her. Okay, gave me a little bit of a heart attack that she was getting upset. Well, she's get upset. You're doing perfectly well, Yoko, and much respect that you're actually. I mean, it looks like Random Yoko is going to be our first J-vlogger to possibly be a politician. I mean, I think that's the only direction I can see her going. She's very, very politically active, and she's fortunately from northern Kyushu, where she'd probably stand a good chance of getting elected. So power to her. But that's interesting. Back to the comments. We are now coming up on the hour, but I'm going to go dive into comments now. There's so much awesome stuff that's been going on. Much very, very cool stuff. What's been happening with the stem cell lady. After the Nobel Prize and all of these accolades for Yamanaka, the guy who figured out this, this new process for making stem cells without requiring embryos or all this other sort of stuff. I forget even what they called it now, but this technique that they named. And now this lady who was rejected by foreign science publications and so on for so long, who stuck to her research, and turns out she's just found a super simple way of making stem cells, which can be used for all sorts of awesome uses, like regenerating hair. Not that that's what I want them to spend all the research money on, but it's a really, really good idea if you can allocate the money. Regenerating hair, I think, is a really, really good use of stem cells, but it's up to you. I'm not just saying. Suggestions. I'm perfect. Actually, this is really great. I know when it's raining first, I'm faster on my bicycle than most people. I'm actually pretty comfortable. But it is pretty cool, and all the stuff is coming out of Japan, and it works with Japan, because Japan is a country, basically, if you ask me, full of geeks who just like doing boring stuff over and over and over, which is really essential to research, and this is another case of that, and it's kind of cool. I mean, I think it's what's one of the many endearing things about Japan for me. So let me go through some other topics and the comments. And bag scandal comments are now suddenly going, and yes, I see people talking about cruelty-free foie gras is possible, apparently. So yeah, you know, and the whole thing with Taiji and whatnot. I mean, at the end of the day, have your discussion, and honestly, I'll say this. I'm a meat eater, I'm a happy meat eater, and I've been hunting, and I've shot rabbits, and I've done all that stuff, and I didn't find it very pleasant, but I did it, and it was kind of a good experience, because I think everyone who eats meat needs to understand where it comes from. But if you ask me, one day we're going to be living on spaceships, and animal-based agriculture is really not going to be good for spaceships, and humanity is one day not going to eat meat anymore, and I'm sure that when we do stop eating meat, we're going to look back on ourselves today as cavemen for killing to eat. But you know, for the first 4.6 billion years anyway, unfortunately, it's still the norm, and you know, humanity is going through a change on that, which I think is very interesting. But you know, I don't think it's morally defensible. I'm going to lose an argument to any vegan any day, but until they're the majority, I'm going to keep enjoying my meat, and you know, I'm not going to make exceptions for certain non-endangered animals. That's my kind of thing. But you know, but definitely don't do it cruel. You know, cruelty is not cool. But at the end of the day, you know, and this is the thing. And again, if you get a vegan and you ask them, really, are you really making a distinction between the lack of cruelty, killing a dolphin, and with the wrong technique? Are you going to is it going to make any difference to you if they do it with the right technique? You know, no. Is killing any animal, the whole basis of that is that killing any animal is cruel, and you know, and that's actually hard to defend. I would lose that debate quite happy, you know, without argument. But enough about that anyway. That's right. Spaceships were going to eat space whales. Good call, Darth JV. Yes, that's right. Well, you know, we're all going to hell, but if we're going to hell eating meat, I'll buy a ticket. So, just going through some other news stuff. Of course, yeah, Osaka mayor, for whatever reasons, he's having, you know, the momentum that Hashimoto was having is kind of, he's being a bit lost. Isshin no Kai has lost some of his national popularity. Even in Osaka legislature, he's lost a majority. So he called a snap election for the mayor. In the end of the day, even if he gets another mandate and he gets re-elected, it doesn't change the problem he is right now, that the legislature in Osaka doesn't want to cooperate with him. And Osaka is a famously communist, socialist, left-wing city with a very right-wing mayor at the moment. Interesting fact about Hashimoto as well, which I didn't actually fully appreciate until about half a year ago. His ideological mentor is a guy called Taichi Sakaya, who's a former Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry bureaucrat, and he is one of my favorite authors. He's one of the original guys I really read up about, who got me interested in Japanese politics, who has an idea. He's a bureaucrat. He's an anti-bureaucrat. He's got a theory on Japanese life and society that, you know, the current challenges that Japan has with deflation and so on are a byproduct of what in many ways up until now has been a very successful apolitical bureaucratic control of Japanese society. But now now that it's in a kind of a crisis, it can't really fix those problems itself unless it can free itself of the shackles of, you know, over-regulation and over-control by bureaucrats instead of accountable people. You know, not enough freedom and not enough political accountability with governance. And this is from a very high-profile, very, very smart ex-bureaucrat. And you know, he's the guy who persuaded Hashimoto to get into politics. And if that's the case, I'm like, I mean, Hashimoto's got a big mouth, but I actually always find myself agreeing with the political ideology, the idea, you know, not the comfort woman stuff, and he sees a lot of gaffes which, you know, get everything distracted. And of course it's because the people who are ideologically opposed to him, which is actually, you know, most of Osaka technically, those newspapers, the Asahi, they will jump on any slip because, he represents a real ideological threat. But that said, he does make the slips. The Japanese press is brutal, by the way, and that's, but that's a formula everyone knows and they're getting into, which actually also, oh, you know what? So Ado Inoue is asking me to plug his page on J-Politics. I don't know. I actually retweeted. He did a tweet today, just before the show, actually, on voting in the Tokyo election. Ado Inoue, which I retweeted. So if you go to my Twitter feed, you can see Ado's blog on the political process. I don't know if that's your J-Politics stuff. If so, I mean, send it to me and I will definitely tweet it later. Ado, I've got you. There, camera there. Not my normal camera. Sorry about that. I got you. Yeah, absolutely. If that, in any case, I mean, Ado, I must admit, I don't fully know his politics. Actually, I kind of get a sense, and he seems to get offended when I get it wrong. I call him conservative, which I didn't mean it actually strictly politically when I said that either. He's a family values, man of principle type guy when I said conservative, but I don't actually know which way he's voting. And that's all. That's cool. That's up to him. I mean, he's very lucky. He can vote. But Hashimoto is aligned with the same people, with the same sort of ideology that politically I like in Japan. I'm going to say it. I mean, I can't vote, so it doesn't make a difference. I like Ozawa. I don't know why he's moved out to the far left and anti-nuclear, like socialist type thing, because he was always an anti-bureaucrat guy, as was Hashimoto, and that's the core ideology, which gets lost in all the noise too easily. Talking about the press being kind of out of control in Japan and kind of like a gang. Jake Adelstein. I've been reading Tokyo Vice on Kindle, on Kindle app on iPad Mini, and so far I'm halfway through it. Progress report on that is my first one. I really want to get him on, and I've had some brief Twitter interaction where he's indicated he would be willing to come on, which would be great. And everyone, I can tell. Well, so okay, I first became aware of Jake in the aftermath of the 3/11, of the tsunami, earthquake, nuclear thing, and he was very high profile. A lot of people were retweeting him then, and I was very annoyed at a lot of things that were being tweeted and a lot of angles on the news. And he was another guy I found really annoying at that time. He was always tweeting. Basically, he is just promoting his book, Tokyo Vice. And he's talking about, don't forget all the heroes in the construction, road works and the people in the nuclear power plant who are Yakuza. He seemed to be praising Yakuza in a kind of a way to promote his book in the context of a, earthquake and tsunami that killed 25,000 people. And I kind of found that to be personally actually in bad taste. And I thought it's cool he got to be on the Daily Show, but he was kind of playing a persona of someone who appeals when you're trying to sell a book in America or whatever. Like there are a lot of books on Japan which do very well selling outside of Japan by playing up the, I'm going to show I'm the biggest expert on this, and I'm going to show you the hidden truth about Japan on this. And it all came across to me like a routine I'd heard before from people who you look at their stuff and it's not up to scratch. I kind of learned more about him from other people. I didn't like what I first saw of him, and I heard other people say, well, he worked at the Yomiuri as a journalist, and I was like, well, that's interesting. That's something I haven't heard of before. Is that really? Are you sure? Because again, I wouldn't put it past, not knowing anything about the guy, someone to, a lot of people who write these sort of books embellish a lot, and his whole tone reeks of embellishment, and it's not uncommon among journalists and writers and so on coming out of Japan. So I kind of treated this guy with a lot of mistrust when he first appeared on my radar. I had a very good friend who read his book and came to me and said, dude, Hiko, you got to read his book, it's awesome. And a friend whose judgment I trust a lot on this, he's actually like a Japanese guy, and I kind of said, yeah, I'll get round to it. And I never really got round to it. But over time, I've kind of learned more about Jake, and I've seen more of what he does. And his credibility has gone up over time with me, although at the same time, I've heard good and bad things from different people. It's a very small community here as well, so everyone really does find out about everybody else. But over time, he's at a higher level, and there's no question. I think I've come to the conclusions without reading the book that he would be a very, very interesting person to talk to and hang out with, and he would probably be very charismatic and entertaining. And frankly, he does have a lot of the credentials to back him that a lot of other people who act like him don't. So he can actually back it up, which is interesting because not many people who act like him can back it up in my experience, and I don't trust people who act like that. But I'm reading his book and it's going through at the moment. I haven't really gotten to the big Yakuza part of the story yet. I've gotten to his early assignments as a Yomiuri writer. And they're interesting and they're good stories. He's a good storyteller. I've had some laugh out loud things. I have been marking as I've gone through, and I'm going to raise this with him. Maybe not on the video, maybe on the video. I have 2 place marks today where I've just left a note saying bullshit. But at the same time, I like within a page of that, there was something awesome, and I was just laughing out loud. And I thought, okay, and I get the feeling I wonder if parts of the book were not just setting things up in a way, like for the storytelling part of it. But the guy comes off as credible and having had a really interesting experience of a type that I jealously guard as being the sort of thing which I thought only, I've worked in a rough bottom of the ladder, fully Japanese environment, and it's not pleasant. I don't know many people who have survived going through a process like that, and it's something I always kind of take pride in myself. And I see he's probably gone through something rougher than what I went through, actually, in terms of just a first job in Japan. And I find it really interesting. I can relate to parts of it, and parts of it I'm like, wow, like that's out there, and I think he'd be super interesting. So I'm enjoying the book, and I'm going to get through it. He's a good writer, and he's very easy and engaging to read so far. He's not a Bayer McNeil. Bayer McNeil is an artist. I mean, I'm not joking, actually. I'm not blowing smoke. He's a really great writer, and actually, the great thing about this is that I want to get back into I really do want to get back into my writing. I just don't have a lot of free time in my life, but reading Jake's book reminds me of the joy I get from my own storytelling when I find the time to put it together, and he's making me remember a lot of episodes of my own life as well, which I really want to tell. But I want to tell them with some cues from Bay's storytelling style, because it's just so mind-blowing the way that he writes. But there again, I think Jake's personality comes through, and it's really fun to read. So far so good. I'll give a final report on it. It's obviously, I'm not going to talk with the guy without having read his book if I'm going to have him on. But so far it's recommendable. So there's that. Tara Greenfield. Actually, and this is another point. Edo is pointing out that I've heard of people like this before. There are a lot of people who've come out. Japan's foremost, expert on the mafia who've doing foreign lecture tours because they were driven out of the country by the mafia. I've actually, even in New Zealand, I don't know if this is the guy exactly, but there's a guy who's touring around New Zealand and Australia with this. There's a guy in Yorkshire right now who said to the Daily Mirror just a couple of weeks ago that he was driven out of Japan without telling his wife and children, embezzling $60,000 and going to Thailand, and because he was driven out by the mafia. And that might be true, but it might also be a lame excuse. I don't know. I like to take people at their word, but sometimes a lot of people, they come across as more credible than others. And Jake, unfortunately, started out with me on the foot of being one of those people. And I got to tell you, he over time he has won me over somewhat. He's winning me over more with his book, which was actually unexpected because I kind of read the book with a healthy sense of skepticism. But he is very engaging, and I'm finding the book very interesting to read. So thank you for that, Ado. And I know you've had some interaction with him as well. And I think you've probably gone through a similar transition to me anyway. I'm going to wrap it up very soon, but thank you all for joining. I'm sorry it's been a busy week. There's like all this awesome stuff. There's like, oh man, see, I'm flipping through my thing now. Like, here's the story of a police officer who was like in Osaka. It's always in Osaka. It's always in Osaka or Saitama, but pretty much Osaka. This police officer hazing his subordinates by making them eat food as punishment, like for small tasks, causing them to like making them eat 15 hamburgers at once as a punishment, or drink 4 liters of coffee milk as a punishment. And this is one thing about Japan. This is actually not an unusual type of a punishment that senpais, that seniors like at university or a baseball team might give to their kohais. But this guy did this to 4 guys who, one of them put on like 15 kilos of weight in 6 months, and they basically got the guy fired. And it's basically old-fashioned senpai kohai hazing, and it's horrible. Somehow it feels appropriate that it came from Kansai, but it's horrible stuff. What's her name? much love and congratulations to Haruko Obokata, the lady who did the stem cell thing, and looking forward to seeing that very important research. You know what I'm talking about. And some interesting stats this week about inflation coming back to Japan, which everyone's trying to generate, which sounds great. The prices are going up, yay, inflation, no more deflation. But wait a minute, wages are still the same, which means that I'm getting poorer. And can someone remind me what was wrong with deflation again when my wages were the same and stuff was getting cheaper? I mean, I think we all know you need to have this cyclical society. And of course, the other thing is that, of course, prices are going up. But a very big part of this is the fact that we've had all the nuclear reactors turn off, and energy, which goes into everything, food production, you know, anything, price goes up from increased energy costs, and as well as energy itself, which we need. And that's inflationary. I'm not convinced yet that the Abenomics, I mean, I'm like everybody. I hope that Abenomics is working, and this is going to turn into a cycle of increasing wages, of increasing prices and increased spending. But all that we're seeing right now is increased prices and no clear vision on increased wages yet. And I hope, without the increased wages, it's not a good thing that we're having inflation, but we'll see. In my HikoZine, I did find an article tweeted by Rochelle Kopp, who's like one of my favorite people in the world. She's super interesting, on a list of free Wi-Fi cafes in Tokyo, because a lot of people complain about no Wi-Fi when they come to Tokyo. What else? People in China, young people aren't learning to do kanji anymore. And more foreign workers, and more talk about allowing foreign workers in to help meet there's a shortage of workers in the construction industry in Japan right now because of there's less young people. But with the construction boom for the Olympics, there's no other way than to bring in foreigners, and they're painfully debating how to do that. And that was just embarrassing to watch. The construction ministry said we need more foreigners, and then the Ministry of Justice, which also covers the immigration ministry, says, well, you want to be careful, you don't want to increase crime. As if increasing foreigners automatically to the Ministry of Immigration automatically increases crime. But this is the LDP. So lots of really interesting stuff. Please do this. Go and have a look at my HikoZine, because it's got lots of awesome stuff to read, including Gakuranman wrote a blog the other day, based on a video that we did a couple of years ago, which his new blog is on Gaijin Pod, on how to argue with Japanese people, and we did a little role play on that, which was much fun, which is revisited on that. Do go and check out. Also, I do have the video with Kurt, the 2.5 Oyajis featuring Kurt Bell. It was awesome. I'm going to do one last round of questions, and then I'm going to rock on out. But thank you for joining me. It's been a lot to talk about this week. So, what else have we got here? We got people talking about, I see that there's some good conversations going on in the comments, which I'm glad about, because I'm sorry I haven't been that engaged in the comments tonight. So give me apparently, according to Darth JF, the BBC this year mixed up the Year of the Horse with the Year of the Horse. But it's actually, and someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe it is true that the Year of the Horse, for some reason, is a year that people try to avoid having children. It's like there are certain years that people like try to get their kids born in that year, like, I don't know, Year of the Dragon or whatever. It's meant to be really good, and for some reason Year of the Horse is a really bad year for fertility. On the 12-year cycle, it's the year that consistently has the fewest births. Parents like hold off, and that could be the reason. It could be because the BBC will mis-subtitle that they were born in the Year of the Horse. Wasn't me. I wasn't born in that year. Kantensai, yes, 今週は忙しかった。すみませんでした。Maybe it'll be a bit more settled down next week. It hasn't really been a big news week. The stem cell thing is interesting. Oh, this is interesting. There's this site, which was on Rocket News, talking about there was a site which teaches you Japanese learning based on flashcards with selfie photos taken of Japanese swimsuit models. Honestly, I'm pretty sure by the time they finished getting through that study program, they wouldn't even remember that they studied Japanese anymore. But it could work. I mean, who knows? You could just be flashing back all the time. You never know. So America's next space shuttle, Korea just being an asshat, like it's unfortunately doing a lot. all this other news, lots of YouTube stuff, twerking stormtroopers. It's all. This is kind of awesome. There's like the scientists have videotaped, been able to record on video the creation of a memory, like in an optic nerve for the first time. I mean, it's mind blowing. You can actually see like whatever it is that's the physical representation of in a brain optical, brain nervous network of a memory being created, which is crazy. Scientists these days. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap it up, but there is lots and lots of cool stuff in this. So go subscribe, read it with me. We can talk about it next week, because I'll be back here next week. I'll be on 2.5 Oyajis this week. Don't know who the guest is going to be yet. Jake is what I'm really looking forward to, but it's going to be a while. But I'm going to try to get some more guests. If not, it'll just be me and Victor, and we always have lots of fun. And of course, every weekend, 11 p.m. Tokyo Tonight with me, talking with you. I think we're having fun. Except for one person. One person's not having fun. Fine. That was probably because I had the fan in the middle of a jet engine when I turned this on, and then I lost the video. What could I say? Stubby talking about dredging waste in the Great Barrier Reef. Yeah, that sucks. I don't know what's going on with that. The Thai election thing. I don't want to get into Thai. I don't want to talk about it, I guess, openly, because I admit that I don't know enough about it. But honestly, having these yellow shirts who I understand support the military and the king, and they're basically rich people who think that poor people shouldn't be allowed to vote, and there should be a fixed number of like educated people, and uneducated people shouldn't have voting rights, and they're physically stopping people from voting, trying to undermine an election that if they contested they would lose. I mean, I know they don't like Thaksin, and they say that he's corrupt and whatever, but he was elected, as was his sister, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but it doesn't look good. I'm sure there are subtleties I don't get about that election, but that news at the moment. What is it with people are finding, is democracy going to survive? Maybe a topic for next week. People are now finding ways to undermine. It used to be democracy was the answer to everything that everyone could accept, even if they lost, but not so anymore. Stew plus Shibuya equals Tsubuya. I got it. I read it like W, like Tsubuya works a lot better. So thank you for that correction, Tsubuya. I will keep that under advisement in future. So enough baiting. I'm going to check out, but it's been a long, with technical hijinks, video. I'm going to see if I can have an unawkward ending for a change. Thank you for joining. See you next week. And good fun, everybody. So I am now going to go into the live settings of this, and I'm going to click on the stop stream button, which is here. And I'm now going to click on the live control room, where it is, boom, stop streaming. So I'll see you all later. Thanks for joining, and see you next week. Peace. Stop streaming.